Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. It's Thursday night and we're here in the upper gallery of the museum, and this is another segment of Hoboken Talks. You can listen live, hopefully you're live now, but you can also check us out on YouTube and Facebook, but YouTube is our preferred platform. And tonight, we have a great guest who we've been trying to get for a long time, and tonight is the night, and that is John O'Brien, who has many credentials. He grew up here in Hoboken at 5th and Garden, or 5th Street, I should say,
Yes, sir.
and is associated, in my mind, as longstanding firefighter. He put in his 33 years plus. He still is associated with the fire department. We'll talk about that later. And it's so great that you're here. Welcome, John.
Pleasure to be here, Bob. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
It's an honor.
Okay, I feel the same way. Usually I like to talk about the background that we
Okay.
have. So I think that's you in the truck looking out proudly.
That is, yeah. Yeah, that shot was taken, that truck was pulling out of the Observer Highway firehouse, and the cameraman would be facing north. Those buildings in the back are on the right across the street from the Observer firehouse.
And so those buildings look like they're boarded up. They're a little abandoned.
Well, that was different times, as you could well imagine. The empty lot next to it is no longer empty, of course. It was built on many years ago. And those buildings suffered some fire damage over the course of time, and it was pretty representative of a lot of the housing that was still going on downtown, particularly in the Fourth Ward in Hoboken, probably around the mid '80s. I got that picture around 1985 in my head.
And you mentioned the owner reached out to you at a certain point?
Yeah, myself and one of my peers, Ed Smith, was sitting behind the firehouse one day, and Bill Jansen, who owned the buildings, came in the back after a fishing trip, and he was totally disgusted with the tenants in the building, and he offered both of those buildings to us, wanted to give us first shot at them for $85,000 back then.
And this is mid 80s.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, give or take, and it was a lot of money to us back then on a firefighter's salary.
course,
But
of
give you an
course.
example of how real estate has gone, as
Right.
we all know.
The firehouse on Observer Highway is known as the Island. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was given that moniker X amount of years ago. Somebody had made up the sign. We used to call it the highway. You know, I'm working down a highway or working down the island.
And there's a number of firehouses in Hoboken, but I think that's the only one that's freestanding, right?
That is correct. Yeah, yeah. It's a beautiful building. Very,
It is,
very
and
unique.
I remember it did suffer damage in Sandy,
Yes.
but it did allow it to get, shall we say, rehabbed.
A little bit of
And-
upgrade.
and
yeah.
they did a great job with the
it's-
pointing and
They did
so
a
on.
beautiful job on it. There was many rumors over the course of the years that it was going to come down, and
Right.
so I'm really happy that they did save it.
And there was a period they were going to try to close it.
That
And
is
then I
correct.
think the residents downtown, in the St. Joseph School was going
Yeah.
at that time.
Yeah, there was an attempt back in the day. I think I was actually union president at the time. There was an aggressive attempt to try to get it closed, and the powers that be at the time, just a matter of doing business, severely underestimated what that building meant to those people down in the old Fourth Ward. It was a refuge if there was a crime being committed, if their basements were getting filled with water, and just about anything else that plagued the Fourth Ward. They knew that they can come banging on that door, and they would get help. So
Quick response time.
yeah. So I think everybody that wanted to close it was really taken back, and well, long story short, it remained open
It's still here.
to this day.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to maybe start a little with some of the pictures from your family. And I know there's some, you have some good stories connected here.
Well, yeah. This is my mom and dad's wedding. It's my father in the foreground. My mother, of course, throwing a bouquet. My uncle Jim over to the right. And if you look at the BP on the back, that was in the Blue Point, which is located down on Willow Avenue in Hoboken. It was a venue for many, many weddings, and I didn't bring all the other pictures, but I love the simplicity of your friends sitting at a round table with a setup in the middle of the table where you made your own drinks, and the music was mellow, and it was just more about a celebration and conversation. And everybody just always looked happy there, and simpler times.
I didn't notice the BP before,
Yeah.
and I do see the bouquet being thrown.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
captured the moment, and kind of fun, your dad's gesture there too.
Yeah, I don't know if he was
Almost
throwing
like he's gonna
something. He
catch
might
it.
have thrown the garter at the time.
Oh, that's
I'm
right.
not quite sure.
And obviously, weddings today are like a mega event,
Yes.
and they're much simpler back then,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yes.
Smaller venues and
Like everything else back then, more humble.
more humble.
More,
I like that.
More humble and very very intimate.
Sure.
You know, in those small intimate settings, a lot to be said about it.
Right. So you go into firefighting as a career,
Yes.
and I guess you would say your dad influenced you.
Well, yeah, going to work in my house was going to the firehouse. It was like Dad's going to work, and we drive past Observer Highway, and it would be that's where Dad worked, and on a lucky day he'd take you down there. And
So you
sit in the
eventually
truck.
work in the same firehouse as your dad did.
Yeah. And my father began as a firefighter in 1947 until 1979, and I had gotten on the job well, not relatively young, very young. And fortunately, when I got there, it was kind of, he just kind of gave me the keys to his locker, and it was my dream come
The
true.
same
because-
locker.
Yeah. And that was the firehouse. There was others, but that's where my dad worked. So, as a young man, of course, there's somebody that looked up to his father the way I did, was very proud of him. It was really nice to work down there and work right along with some of the people he worked with, because I came on just as he was exiting. So.
Gotcha.
And I was always
Gotcha.
told that, I'm not like my father, and you can't shine your father's shoes, and yeah. And it's true.
Right. And can you remember like your dad leaving for work in the morning and coming back? Would he smell like smoke if there was a fire? That kind of memory?
You're going back to those days where, the town constantly smelled like smoke back then. And there was a day and night shift back in the day. So, my father would always say goodbye to us. I think, knowing what I know today, always cognitive of the fact that it's a dangerous job. And I just remember, whenever you heard sirens in the middle of the night, my father was working, or the phone would ring in the middle of the night, or the loudspeaker system would come on, and my father would go to work. My mother never went back to sleep. My mother would be like, okay, 1:30 in the morning. My dad would come around and give us all a kiss on the forehead, and he'd go out. And my mother would throw a pot of coffee on and just basically be up for the rest of the night. And
Do you remember her kind of saying, hey, this is too stressful? Or, I mean, was she stoic about it? Or
you know what? I lost my mom when I was like 14.
Okay,
So
wow.
I never had the opportunity to really discuss that with her as I had the luxury of discussing my dad's life. But there's little doubt in my mind. I mean, even my own wife, and we made the headlines a little bit during my career. It's just something that I'm not going to say but something that we do, and we take it in stride. But you can't discount the amount of anxiety that, your family, particularly your wife, or these days your husband would have, not only with you going to work, but also these days of saying, hey, there's a 3-alarm fire going on in Hoboken. You're not going to feel happy until you get that call to say, I'll see you in a little while.
right, because I guess there's a certain amount of with the firefighter of adrenaline kicking in, and doesn't even have time to process the danger.
True.
But the family members are
Safe
kind
to
of sitting
assume.
at home, and that's what's going to go through their mind. So
Sound
it's
way of looking at it.
pretty
yeah.
intense.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. I would
definitely.
agree with that. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So moving along visually,
Okay.
we're going to take. We have some again scenes. So what time period is this?
Oh, I'll have to put that probably around the 40s.
Okay.
If I'm looking at it.
Sure.
somewhere, mid-
And so you're not on the scene
no,
yet.
no, I haven't
but-
arrived yet.
Yeah.
I'm not even quite sure where that was taken, but again, that's the O'Brien clan. That's not my mother's side of the family. That's my dad's side of the family. And again, the togetherness, the happiness, the very humble surroundings and the humble apartment. With you educated me and said that's a hot water heater in the back. I always wondered what the heck that was.
Right.
But yeah, I grew up with a lot of these folks. Cast of characters.
And all the energy's in the kitchen, right?
Yes.
And that's where it all happens.
Yes. No doubt.
And it's not a big space. Probably a railroad apartment.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. All
Sure.
railroad apartments.
Right.
I mean, I shared a room with my brother between the living room and the kitchen, so there was no posters of Led Zeppelin on the wall. There was, kind of like trying to sleep on the turnpike, But it was great. We had 6 people in 4 rooms, and we got to know each other really well.
Gotcha. That's a nice shot. I like the shot a lot.
Yeah, it's
Just
cool.
Probably a dinner, Thanksgiving. or
That's Jack
something.
O'Brien down there of Parade
Really?
Fame down
On the far right?
in the lower right hand
Lower
corner.
right.
Everybody knows my Uncle Jack, and that's his mother and his father.
Oh, wow.
Up,
yeah. I mean, I knew the last name O'Brien, but
Yeah.
it's a common name.
Yes,
I think
no
it's
doubt, no
Only
doubt.
recently I learned that Jack would have been your uncle.
Yes, yes,
Or
yes.
was your uncle.
Yeah, great guy.
And one of my all-time favorite people in Hoboken with that Hoboken spirit, Ralph is
My buddy Ralph,
Okay, one of my favorite chiefs. Cool.
great
Yes.
man.
Yeah. So we're moving down. That's got to be you.
Actually, no. Actually, no. That is my cousin Bill.
Okay.
My house is in the background with the air conditioner sticking out. It was back in the 50s, a little
Right.
bit before my time. Typical Hoboken house with my grandmother on the ground floor, my family living in the middle floor, and my cousins living on the top floor, and that's where Bill lived.
Right.
So that's a picture that his mom Rose probably took, and most people will know Moran's Pub these days, a great little Irish pub with great food right next door. That is the old front of Moran's, a typical bar setup with all the ornate wood. And I recall, now that I'm looking at that, I recall a crash one night, and I looked out my second floor window, and there was an old ambulance. It was a Cadillac ambulance that they had years ago, with a cherry top just spinning around. Halfway through the bar that came up was a green and white Cadillac ambulance that rammed through the Porthole Tavern, which was the name of that bar. The Barrel Tavern was up the block from me. And so I just remember looking out the window and seeing that ambulance, and as a little boy being in shock. And as I got older, I realized I don't know if I'd want to be in a bar and have a couple of cocktails in me and have an ambulance come through. It would be.
Don't sit by the front window.
If that wouldn't sober you up, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what would.
I think I'm reading an election poster, pre-election.
Thomas A. Gallo Association. Right. Thomas Gallo was a politician back in the. I got that in the late 50s,
Gotcha.
Possibly early 60s, but I'm going to go with late 50s on that.
Yeah. And the outfit looks 50s for
Yes,
sure.
yeah. Oh,
When
yeah,
the
yeah.
parents would dress
No
up
doubt.
the boy like he's going to Easter parade. or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
So what type of bar? So that is Moran's. We're at the corner of Fifth and Garden.
That is correct. yeah.
And the Porthole. What type of bar would that be compared to, let's say, a Moran's today?
Well, it was first of all, it was a wonderful blue collar community. We had the Boston Fish Market across the street with the sawdust on the floor, but this was a longshoreman's bar. These are living on Fifth Street back in the day, and waking up to foghorns from the Holland American line, I believe it was. Correct me if I'm wrong. And in that bar, you had a jukebox, and I specifically remember "Strangers in the Night" and the hits of the day, and these big-shouldered stevedores with the flannels on coming in. They'd open up at 6 a.m. and they'd close about 2 or 3, and the place would smell like Clorox. They'd mop it up. And Mike Costello with the apron was the proprietor, and the guys would basically ask for 1 and 1, which was a glass of beer along with a shot of Four Roses whiskey. And that would be the eye opener. And those same guys would be there after work on the way home for the decompression session. And as we got mischievous, we used to throw firecrackers under the bar stools once in a while, and I used to keep them honest.
It sounds like On the Waterfront, the film, a little.
Yeah,
little-
we caught the tail end of that, the
Right.
whole pier action with the stevedores and
Pier C,
yeah, with the hooks and the gloves and so on like that.
Sure.
So yeah, I do recall that. A wonderful neighborhood to grow up in.
Yeah. Okay. Looking very angelic.
Very, very angelic. Yeah, I was looking extremely holy in that picture. That was my confirmation picture. I guess I was in the 6th grade, early 70s. And yeah, it's one of my favorites. I got the TV in the back.
Cuckoo clock, which was kind of exotic, I would think.
Yeah, well, my uncle Jack, who served at World War II, was over in Germany, and after the war, he brought home several of those. So there was kind of like several family heirlooms. Some of that are still out there. There was 4 of them in my family, with my uncle Jack's parents, mine, my uncle Jim, and I think there was another one out there. But there were all these beautiful Black Forest clocks, and I grew up with that thing going off every hour and slept through it. But one time after I moved out, I went back to try to sleep over, and it just destroyed my night's sleep. And we'd have to have it rebuilt every 10 years over in Jersey City. The guy would change the leather bellows and all that. Good.
Right. So you mentioned like sounds growing up. So you mentioned the foghorns.
Yeah.
You've mentioned the clock.
The clock.
What else you got from sound memories?
Well, in that neighborhood, I grew across from Church Street Park. I'm sorry, Church Square Park, which was the metal on metal squeaking of these horses and the swings with that constantly. Probably from March until November, you would hear that, along with the basketballs dribbling and all the activity that went on over there in the park. Those would sounds. Of course, the jukebox next door was big.
Different peddlers, maybe?
Yes, Bob Ferrante used to come around with his pickup truck and park right across the street, and he would bark his peaches, 3 pounds for $1, tomatoes, oranges, and your mother would send you over there to get some fruit, and he'd throw an extra one in and say, make sure you tell your mom I threw an extra one in there and didn't charge you. Yeah, so that was great. And you had the Zazzarino, the La Tripe guy, who would come around and peddle his wares, and there were knife sharpeners that used to come around, a truck that used to sharpen the knives. So
now we have the bell from OLG,
Yes.
Our Lady of Grace.
Yes.
Was the bell ringing in those days?
correct me if I'm wrong. That current bell I was just an OLG yesterday. That current bell, did they go speaker, or is that the live bell again?
It sounds live.
It does sound
It
live.
has a real resonance to
But
it.
they must have speakers there because I hear the.
They do, I think they have
Yeah.
both, but it seems like we have to ask Father
Yeah.
Santora
Yes,
what's
yeah.
going on there. But I often wonder.
The bell was there. Yeah, they had masses in OLG. They had an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 1 o'clock mass.
Wow.
Church was much more in vogue back then as it is today, and everybody get dressed, and your wife would hold your arm and walk into church and
Go down the aisle.
go down the aisle, and it was actually it was a very pleasant thing.
Mm-hmm. You also, before you were talking about the sound of the communication system in Hoboken, most people won't know about that.
Yeah. So back in the day, my understanding of it was there was a air raid system that was installed in Hoboken. The thought being that the technology improving for the Germans or the Axis forces may develop a technology where we could be hit. So Hoboken, being what it was for the war effort, developed a blackout system where all the beautiful skylights were painted, as we know, up in the train station that just received a drab gray. And the air raid system, there was a tin horn on almost every intersection. And if anybody watches MASH and you hear radar with that attention, this is the way that they would turn out firemen to general alarms of fire. As a kid, whenever it was snowing, everybody looks on their phone today for the snow date, but me and my brother Joe used to just go by the window and open this old single pane window that was all icy inside, and we used to carve our initials in it and push the snow off, and you would just hear the police saying, "Attention, there'll be no school today for the following," and they play Christmas carols over it and so on like that. So the system was a salvaged air raid system that was, I'd say it was with us clear through the 60s and perhaps into maybe I'm going to call it the early 70s. I could be wrong. Joe
Right.
Peluso is still around today and probably had a lot to do with keeping that system
The electrician.
working. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was also air raid horns all over town too. There was one behind the firehouse on Observer Highway that myself and one of my early mentors, Vin Gwinter, we tried to get it going. It didn't work out, So yeah.
I somehow think I still see a few of at least the hardware or the platform
Yeah, they
for
were-
them on poles.
They were like
But,
big 35-gallon drums that were mounted up on certain
Okay,
things.
that's
Yeah.
bigger than I would think.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
good. But
yeah.
I mean, it worked. But they just didn't get maintained, and there wasn't that
Right.
fear of the
Yeah,
attack, shall
yeah.
we say? So that goes by the wayside.
All fell by the wayside. Sure.
Yeah, definitely. So at play, Hoboken play, which is a great topic.
Yeah. So where we were fortunate in my neighborhood, Church Square Park was Church Square Park. There were times at Church Square Park it was really not a safe environment back in the day.
Interesting.
Right across the street from where I lived, there was this lot in the back that was about 50 feet by 25 feet. And the guy that owned it really didn't mind us going in there. So we had this wonderful little area where we went in, and it was a strange lot because the surrounding properties would protrude in at 6 feet and 3 feet, so it was never developed. It was a cut up piece of property. So we played street hockey in there. We just had a lot of firsts in there. We spent countless hours in this place playing what you're seeing here, street hockey, just hanging out. My one friend used to park his cars in there. They quick became our clubhouse, back in the day, one of which was a hearse. But you know what? I got to tell you, when you're a kid and you're hanging out with your friends and it's raining,
Could do it all day,
yeah,
right?
it kind of worked.
Yeah. And I'm back on that. Just go back on that last shot. So the numbers 3, 2, are they like connected with a game, or was it parking spots?
Those
or?
numbers were always there.
Right.
Probably parking spots at some point back in the day. You could see over the John Belenich over his shoulder is a strike zone.
Oh, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. And I think we gave ourselves the moniker the Falcons at some point. So that's indicated above the.
Did you say the Falcons?
The Falcons.
Was that your gang?
You could see it
or
spring.
your
I think
group?
I think we went through a small thing. I don't know. We used to play teams from other blocks, and we called ourselves that for a short
Gotcha.
period. But we were basically like just kind of ragamuffins piecing things together.
Sure.
And,
So I think this property just got developed recently, this
it
space.
did. Yeah.
And because I do often walk by that corner.
Yes,
And
yes.
I don't think I had noticed it as an open space.
Right.
And then I went back there and I go, wow, this is pretty big.
Yeah, I actually.
And then like a year later,
I met the developer, a heck of a nice guy, and so on. And I remember the guy that was building it. I went back there, and he said, "Can I help you?" I said, "No." I said, "This is a lot we used to, me and my friends grew up in." I said, "There are a lot of memories back here." And he said, "You have no idea how many people stop and say, what the hell did you do back here?" Because everybody that walks by keeps talking about this lot.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was
yeah.
like, "Well, we got to take."
And
that.
it was your parents saw it as a safe space.
We were in the neighborhood,
too.
yeah. So,
Yeah,
what
so-
happened there, we take to the grave with us.
Right. Okay. And you're also set up for basketball back
The same
there?
lot, yeah. We threw in $2 each, and those were all 2x4s nailed together, and we dug holes in the ground, and got a few bags of cement and tied it into the telephone pole. And that's Demorest in the background to give you some idea.
Yeah.
That's a schoolyard in Demorest, give you some idea of where it was. So yeah, we had our own basketball court. That's Michael DeBello, a friend of mine that 2 doors away from me, grew up on 5th Street, and the house used to be nicknamed the Row, is what I understood the stevedores used to call it, because they were all rooming houses at one time.
We have Eric Hammer, who's just texted in. It says, what year approximately is the hockey picture? Eric was a big hockey player.
Okay.
I think at like 13th and Bloomfield.
Right, okay.
And so he's kind of curious.
Well, I sort of remember us being Ranger fans, and having names like Hatfield and Jockman, as our heroes back in the day, Brad Park. So you could probably date that into the early to mid 70s, Eric, give or take a few years.
Cool. He's kind of on a delay, so he may not get back.
That's okay.
But
That's okay.
Right. And Joseph Rotundi, great
boy,
job,
Joe.
John. Okay.
Good man, Joe.
Yeah, he was here today, actually.
Was he?
Joseph
Was
is
he?
the teacher, right?
Yes, yes.
He said he saw you the other day when he went home.
He did. He married Mary Cahill. The Cahills were dear friends of ours, grew up on the block. And on that subject, I mean, when you grew up on that block, everything was so tight-knit. And those folks, a very fond memory I have of Joe's mother-in-law, who we just lost. I recall when my mom passed, you talk about friends stepping up. My dad would be working in the firehouse till 6 o'clock, and we'd be in school. And Marie, who had 5 kids of her own, would take my brother Patrick, who, as I mentioned, my brother Patrick has Down syndrome, and currently my sister's doing a wonderful job with him these days. He's still with us, thank God, and enjoying good health because of her. And he's still a pleasure to see, but he used to come off the bus earlier than we got home. So when my father was working and we weren't home, she would just take him into the house. And you talk about neighbors, a true neighbor stepping up to help family down the block and so on like that. I like to think that things like that still exist today.
Right.
But a nod to Marie and, to the family. Thanks for sharing your mom back in those days. It meant a lot to us.
Wow, that's a nice thought. And
There we go.
so Was this one of your favorite games? You're not fighting here.
No,
you're
no,
just kind of
no.
mugging for the camera.
Yeah, exactly. I got the tube socks working with the cutoff jeans. Stickball.
You look a little Fonzish here.
Yeah, well,
Yeah?
I mean, I've had a few more hairs, a few less pounds, a few more hairs,
Right.
and a whole lot more brain cells going on back then.
Sure.
But yeah, no, stickball was a huge pastime for us. You could keep a dozen kids busy with a bat and the ball back then, and we would play in front of Demarest, and you would really have these crazy rules where if the ball went over the third step, or if the ball, you just the boundaries and the foul lines were amazing. That you could catch it off the building and you could catch it on a rebound, and it was just great fun. And we'd hit the barbershop window, and Charlie would come out and yell at us, and he cut all our hair, so we didn't want to get too mad because we'd get our hair cut somewhere else. But anyway,
So
yeah.
how would you pick your teams?
Well, you would take a stickball bat. That's Ed Cruz, by the way, on there. His brother, well represented in the police department, the Cruz family. That's Eddie. You would pick your teams by taking a bat and just tossing it to the other person, and you would climb up the bat with your hands, and the person whose hand went on the bat last would get first pick. And
Actually, we should really you walked in the door today with
my donation.
a bat.
Yes.
So I should show this part because it shows the grip,
Yeah.
and it shows it was well used.
Yes. That is an official 1975-ish.
It could be the bat that's in the photo.
It very well
We
could
may
be.
have documentation of this artifact in use.
So we used to do the mop sticks, but when we were feeling really flush, we would, with 85 cents, we would find our way to Stan Sports Center and purchase one of these.
Right.
And I had that down my cellar for so long, and you're welcome to it if you wanted to put
Oh,
it
we
in the
love
museum.
it. We love it.
It's
Yes.
the real McCoy. Yeah.
And you brought along a game ball. Why don't you hold on to that?
This is an official. It says Spalding, but anybody my age would know that it's pronounced Spaldeen. It's a Spalding. And these were the high bounce balls that we played. I have written on here May 22nd, 1976. We won a doubleheader. 1918 and 29-13. A real pitcher's battle.
Wow.
So that's the real McCoy. Yeah, that ball's probably 50 years old. And they would cost about 20 cents each.
Right. And you would buy these locally, or?
Well, we went to the Copper Kettle, which was catty corner from Demarest back in the day, but every candy store would have them. And as I spoke to you before, when we were really feeling flush, we would go to Modell's in New York City where they would be 10 cents each. And we'd have 144 balls, so we were flush. So when a ball went down the sewer, instead of fishing it out of the sewer with a coat hanger, we would say we have plenty of balls. We got very snobby all of a sudden.
Right.
And we just let the ball stay in the sewer for the poor kids.
Right. And so what about cars?
As far as
Would they sort of impede your game, a car going down the street, or are you more on the sidewalk?
I think we impeded the cars because when you were determined, like if there was a foul ball hit and you were playing first base in front of Demarest, you weren't going to let a car coming down Garden Street stop you from catching the ball. So, there was a few close calls, but nobody ever really got hurt. It was a lot of screeching, a lot of yelling, a lot of people getting angry.
Right.
But we would make ground rules for the cars. You could play a ball off a car as long as it passed first base.
I was going to ask you, hit the car and
Just-
you catch it off the car. Is he out? Is he out?
The most bizarre rules, we would make them up as we go along.
Right. And they're
we'd-
not written down. You're just
No,
sure.
no.
So there's probably a lot of discussion interpreting those rules. Like, I
Absolutely.
don't know about it.
We would argue like all hell, even break out into a few fist fights now and then, all meant with love.
But you wouldn't use the stickball bat to enforce.
Not with your friends, but if you're playing another team, you never know what could happen.
There you go.
There's a lot
there
of-
you go.
there's a lot of
So
passion.
you brought some extra
lot of passion
stick
there.
bats.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Eric is back. Stickball is a lost game, but it was a lot of fun.
Tremendous fun. You would
Yeah.
play on a bounce if you played long ways, or you
What
would
does that mean, long ways?
Long ways would mean, if you're familiar with the front of Demarest, you would be able to pitch the ball on a bounce, and you would hit it towards the cake shop or candy
long
shop
way.
or barber shop. If somebody was using that, you would go in a schoolyard and paint or chalk a strike zone on a wall, and you would then play fastball, stickball, where you would hit the ball against the wall, and you would have to catch it off the wall. If it went so high, it was a triple. You could actually go across the street, hit a wall, come back and hit a second wall, and you could play it off the second wall. Yeah. So yeah,
I don't think I see stickball played at all.
it's a shame. It's a shame.
And-
I introduced it to my sons
Right,
when they were growing up, about 12 years old, and they just had a fantastic time with it.
right,
You know.
right. I mean, all the rage now is pickleball, but that's
Yeah.
very different.
Yeah.
A little more organized and,
Well, from an economic standpoint, a broom handle and a couple of 20-cent balls could keep us busy for a good long time.
yeah. And any idea how long you would be playing stickball? I mean, is it
We'd get out of school, we'd be over there.
till it gets dark?
And,
Right.
until, back in the day when it was dinner time, everybody's mother yelled out the window. And, we would try to ignore it, until the streetlights came, until your father came over with the cigar and just stood there and looked at you. Like your mother called you, what time,
Yeah,
Dad,
yeah.
one more inning, Yeah, so, you learned how to negotiate.
Sure, sure.
yeah.
As I remember your background with your parents, two different backgrounds?
Well, yeah, my dad was 100% Irish, and my mother was born in Italy. So, yeah, I got to know how they met with my dad. They met at a dance, and they got along really, really well. And all of a sudden, she broke up with him. And I learned all this as I got older, and started to talk to my father more as a peer and as a man. And he said, "Geez, I really broke my heart." And probably 18 months later, my father was working, and there was a small fire in the oil burner on the house on Fifth Street, which was my mother's family's house. And, my father, "Terry, how are you? Say, what do you want to go out for coffee?" And they hit it off again. And he says, "Geez, why'd you, she says, "Joe," she goes, "my father passed last year. If I ever brought an Irish guy home, he would have killed me." So she had to wait for her, very hardcore Italian dad to pass along before she could spend time with anybody other than that.
It's
Yeah.
a great story.
Yeah,
And
that's the way it was.
in a sense, the fire brought them together.
Kind of, sort of,
The
yeah.
second time around.
Yeah, he used to drive the back of the fire truck, and so.
Right. I feel like I want to play stickball.
I see that. I
don't
haven't
wanna
put
let
it down
go.
yet. Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
getting a little dangerous there. I'm going to
That's
put
okay.
it down.
It's all good.
Sorry. But the ball and the stick, we will treasure.
You're
It's very
more than
cool.
welcome to it.
Trying to think how to display it already.
I'm sure you'll figure something.
We'll figure it out. Connor O'Brien, it says, "Son O'Brien, How about off the point?" I
Off-
guess the stickball reference.
Well, you're off the point we used to call it flies up or off the point, and you would basically take a Spalding, a high bounce ball, and you would throw it onto a stoop, and the object was to hit the point of the step and make the ball go as far as it could. We used to play up the block from me on one of my neighbor's steps, and again, those wonderful ground rules came in. That if you hit it across the street and it went over the third floor, it's a home run, but if you caught it, it was an out. And again, the arguments would ensue, and keep a half a dozen of you busy with the ball.
Right. So I'm sort of getting inspired here, just kind of try
Wanna
to
play
do
off
a
the
little
point
stickball.
after this? Okay.
And
We
I
can
don't
do
know,
that.
no, tonight, but I think you would be great to kind of reintroduce this a little
I'll
bit.
probably hurt my shoulder.
Right, but you could just coach us.
We could do that.
And
We could do that.
I'm thinking of doing it like 11th at 11th Street, where the bases are.
We could do that.
Kind of reference old baseball,
Oh,
or even right out here in the walkway. Hitting down 13th Street.
Yeah, there's a great deal of interest would be in that. I think everybody just has such fond memories of playing stickball and
Sure,
Hoboken.
but it'd be fun to introduce it to the younger generation.
Tell you what, like I say, when I introduced it to my kids, they had as in off the point. Connor is my son. As in
Okay,
off the
I
point.
was just going to
and
ask. Yeah,
They went, "What are you talking about?" And you show
Right.
it to them, and they just really took a swan dive into the deep end of the pool,
Okay.
saying, "This is great."
sure.
Sort of like having a potato and egg sandwich.
Yeah. So this is Sasha. You are doing great. Do you know
okay.
Sasha?
I think I might know Sasha. It might be Ed's wife if it's the Sasha that I'm thinking of down Florida.
And here's Vera. We know Vera. Please tell us about the matron of Church Square Park. Is that in your knowledge bank?
Yeah. So when Vera was speaking to me on the phone, she took my information and did that little narrative of me that's probably greatly exaggerated as far as
She really enjoyed
the firemen
talking
and
to
so
you.
on and so
Yeah.
forth like that. I mean, we should all be as good as our eulogies and our resumes. But Church Square Park, you walk through it today. It was dangerous park back in the day. You couldn't walk through it.
What does that mean?
Well, in the middle where the bandstand, as we call it, would be a refuge for, like a gang element back in the day. And
So are we 70s?
yeah, early 70s, late
Right.
60s, early to mid 70s. So, but not always. You kind of gauge when you could get in, go through it, and when you couldn't. But I discussed the matron with her, and our mutual friend Bob Drashif just told me tonight what this woman's name was, and it escapes me. Again, if Bob's
Maybe
watching it.
Bob will tune in.
Maybe. You never do know. He's a busy
From
busy.
Spring Lake.
He's a busy man. So I go over to Church Square Park as I walk through there now, and it's beautiful. Everybody's sipping lattes, and they have this wonderful rubber that if you were to fall out of a 3-story building, you would be fine
Right.
underneath these things. And back in the day, there was concrete, and there was blacktop, and there was 80 coats of lead paint on the swings and the seesaws and the horses. So you would get splinters, and you would get, if you and I are on a seesaw, if you're my best friend, it's my job to torture you. So I would let you fall, and you would get hurt.
That up and down thing.
Yeah. So if I were the culprit, the park matron, I have it on my. I hope Bob tells me what her name was. Very square-shouldered woman, almost looked like a woman's Air Force type of a military woman. And it'd be like, none of those shenanigans. You over on the bench. So I'd go on the bench because I let you fall off or I turned I knocked you off the merry-go-round.
Yeah.
And you're on the ground, bleeding profusely from your elbow or your knee or whatever have you. So it was like Saving Private Ryan. It was like, medic, and she would come over. You on a bench, you young fella, let's go. And there was this great little green clapboard house in Church Square Park in a playground, right over where the Marconi statue is. All right, up you go. And you would go into this. It was raw wood. It smelled like a camp cabin. And she put you on a counter. What do we got here? And there was no bacitracin. It was the antibiotics of the day was peroxide and mercurochrome and Bactine, and it was Band-Aids and it was gauze, and she'd patch you up and you'd come out of there, patched up, and you didn't have to go home.
You live just 150 feet away.
Yeah, but you wanted to go back out and play, even bandaged up, because there was something about our mothers years ago. If you went home injured, you were done for the day. For whatever reason, there was this unwritten law of you ain't going back out. You're hurt. So you didn't go home.
You could get worse.
You would get a brown piece of brown paper bag, when you nick yourself shaving, when you would put this thing around your shoulder if you had a strawberry because you didn't want to go home. So, yeah. And that's what you did. And the same thing if you went out in the snow and you got wet. Once you went in, she wasn't going to let you change your clothes and go out. You were done. So we stood out till we were blue. And, so that's the park matron story. She was a wonderful woman. And she took charge of.
So she worked for the city?
She worked for the city, yeah. And she took charge of 40 or 50 kids at a time.
And the structure, this is like right across from Old Emerist.
Correct,
right?
yeah.
And by the Marconi statue
Correct.
you mentioned. So this structure doesn't exist anymore.
No.
It's, the other structures, the bathrooms or the bandstand.
Yes, yeah.
And
this was a small wooden shack.
I've never seen a picture of it, and I
neither.
never heard about it.
I wish we had some pictures.
And we'll have to record her name from Bob on there.
Millie sounds familiar. Millie Kenna sounds, but I'm not sure. But I wish we had more pictures. But back then, you had to pay for the flash bulb, you had to pay for the film, you had to pay for the developing.
Sure.
So they weren't as...
Yeah, and it's usually you did that when you went on vacation not photographing the
Which
matron.
is why there's no pictures of me. I'm the second born.
Okay.
They were
We
pictured
got
out.
some pictures. That's a great story. Thank you, Vera, for bringing it up.
Yeah.
So we're getting older.
We're getting older.
And this looks like the Ranga crew.
It is, yeah.
And tell us about them.
Well, the Ranga family is, again, I'm going to mention Bob Drashif again. That's his brother in a red shirt, Stephen.
Okay.
And these are all that's Michael Romano, Fran Zampella's brother, and just a host of other, Stephen Hudak, ex-councilman. And the Ranga family was the Drashif's mom's maiden name. And the Ranga Club was on the corner of 4th and Jackson.
Right.
And they sponsored our softball team.
Got it.
So usually after the games, we'd end up either in Zampella's, which was our local, watering hole back in the day, owned by Fran, who I work with now. She's a secretary up in my office now. I used to bartend.
It's like no degrees of separation.
I know.
Pretty cool.
But our home away from home used to be on that bench on 7th and Clinton Street. My good friend John Rakowski lived close by, so we would be in his house until it got too full, and then we'd go down there. And unheard of today, but everybody's got a Budweiser nip in their hand in public, and it's just
Not even a brown
sort of-
bag. Right.
Yeah, well, you know what? We were kind of harmless. The neighbors actually liked us there, or hanging out. We
You
kind of
still have your
we made it
uniform,
feel-
your Ranga uniform?
I'm sure there's might be one or two of them left out there, but
Right.
I knowing everybody.
Seems like it should come to the museum with the stick ball and the ball. So
Well, I'll
look,
tell
look
you
around.
what. Well, that was softball. That wasn't stickball.
Oh, okay. No,
That was-
yeah, you wouldn't have uniforms for stick ball.
No, you saw the uniforms.
Yeah,
It was,
right.
That's something out of a Goodwill shop.
Well, it's great. I'm glad.
Yeah, great old picture. Good, all great guys.
Sure. So this is the fancy lot where you played?
Well, back in the day, before everything was a park, anywhere you had more than 15 square feet became a playground. So this was the sewerage plant where Tri-City Sewer is today. But
Okay.
there was this big, vast open area that the high school used to go up there to practice. They would have this is an official softball league in Hoboken, that if two games were going on at once, you guys are playing up the sewerage plant today, and you would go up to this godforsaken field and play on top of who the heck knows what, and if you slid, the dirt was not going anywhere. It was staying in your uniform would turn into a super fun site.
Right. And so
But we had a place to go and enjoy ourselves and play ball and yeah, so that's
so the kids today have no idea of how you guys played.
No, and I mean, I hear my dad, back in the day telling stories about, my Uncle Jack told me a story where he was playing the outfield and a goat butted him, so.
On the west side.
Yeah, so I never really experienced that either. So the evolution is what it is,
Uh-huh. That's interesting. You recognize that.
Yeah.
all
The kids today are
changes.
fortunate as we were before our generation, and isn't that what it's all about? Making it a little bit
That's
better.
good. You can look at it that way. Of
course.
That's great.
Sure,
That's
sure.
great. And again, you have this long career with the
Yeah.
fire department. This is down at the island again.
Yeah, so this is not my original crew. My original crew was Don Peschiata and Vince, two future chiefs did a job on my original crew, John Cassessor and Rich Bloom. So this is a little subsequent to that. Obviously, John and Don had gotten promoted, and these are my two captains, Tony Mosca and Ernie Prudenti, along with Angelo Ligo, George Slareth, Rich Ladeish, and very fortunate as Vince, the second from the left, super fireman, as was Don Peschiata. We ended up finishing our careers together. We went our own way through promotions and so on, and we ended up finishing in the same group. We worked together for the last few years of their careers, and then so I was blessed with that.
Right. So I don't know if you see who signed up. Barbara Davenant.
Barbara, yes. Hi,
Barbara,
Barbara.
great gal.
Yes.
Loving
Wonderful
the
girl.
stories, fond memories of your dad, Joe.
Nice man,
And
my dad.
obviously we're bringing in Jack a bit too.
Yeah.
Barbara and Jack really the
Yeah,
best
they-
of friends.
They
definitely.
laughed their way through difficulties. That gang,
Yes,
They did.
definitely, or paraded their way
Yes,
through.
yes, yes.
They were so connected with Hoboken celebrations and
yeah.
parades. So a newspaper article celebrating your
That's funny. I didn't even know that existed.
Scotch
it
tape
was-
and all, right?
Yeah, it was in the back of the back of one of the pictures that I supplied to you. I found out, so
Yeah.
I haven't seen that in
Sure.
probably 40 years.
Right,
So it's
right.
interesting, yeah. And
Yeah.
looking at the names of 1978, that was.
So Mayor Steve Capiello would have been mayor at the
Yes,
time.
he was. Yep.
And there would have been this was from a ceremony that would
Yeah.
have been in city council chambers.
This was up in City Hall. Yeah.
Right.
And I just remember getting called up there. My good friend Robert Moore made captain that day,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to believe that it's so long ago.
Yeah, cool.
1978, amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. My Uncle Jack.
There's Uncle Jack,
Yep.
Irishman of the Year.
Staple.
Yeah,
Hoboken
definitely.
staple.
And
Patriots, patriot.
wow, great shot. I'm
Yes,
so
yes.
glad to see a picture of Jack. And I think of Jack a lot.
Me
Just
too.
The spirit of his
Yeah.
spirit was so good.
My
He used to
goodness.
walk around with that big Russian hat, and he would make little buttons.
Amazing optimist.
Definitely.
Amazing optimist. Amazing
Definitely.
optimist.
He would talk,
Wonderful family. Jim, Brian, and Maureen. We raised wonderful children.
right.
Barbara came into his life, and he just,
Yeah, Barbara's
he was a light in the room. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I don't know how Barbara and Jack met, but it probably was through the parade and the
I
fifing
would
or the
imagine. So
reenactment.
yeah, I don't know
And
exactly myself.
Wolf says hello, and you're doing a great job. 155.
Ed,
And I remember Jack specifically saying that he had fifed and him and Barbara had fifed and marched to the moon and back. And that was by tabulating how many parades they were in for all those years.
I wouldn't
And
doubt it, but
yeah.
you always have to remember he's Irish. You know, we don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. So that might be an exaggeration, but he did a phenomenal in Ireland, in Dublin. He absolutely loved it. He played the fifes and drums at his son's wedding. I mean, he
Sure.
just didn't stop.
And he would do like a parade in New York City and
Yes.
meet kids and then introduce them to fifing, and they would take it on for their whole life.
And through all of America's challenges, he was a total optimist for this country. He was so proud to be an American and understood, what a great
And
country.
I remember he had a plaque of him first doing fifing, I think at the 1939 World's
Yes,
Fair.
yes,
And
yes.
there was this one band leader in Hoboken, last name was Dershowitz.
Yes, he
who he
mentioned
would
him
talk
often.
about like he was
Mentioned
you
him often,
who
yes,
he had passed
yes.
many, many years away, but
Yes.
really credited him.
Yes.
So on there, great shot. Like to spend a little time thinking about Jack.
Good man.
Could.
My wonderful wife, most patient woman on the planet. Yeah. So best thing that ever happened to me. Super supportive of, it's a great mom, super supportive of everything I've ever done. And anybody in the emergency services to have their spouse support them and deal with the stresses and the working holidays, and getting the kids up on Thanksgiving and getting to a diner at 6 a.m. to spend some time with dad before we went to work. And that goes for cops and firemen and nurses and all these things that a lot of folks take for granted, that it's a holiday with your family. And, to live it through the life of a spouse, the anxiety and the absorbing the absence, it's when you're doing it, you don't realize it. But when you get a little bit older and you're retired, you sit back and you contemplate. And again, as I said before, I think about my mom just sitting up and putting the coffee on. We really are in a debt of gratitude to these people that support us, throughout the course of our lives.
Anthony, enjoying the conversation and memories, John O.B., wonderful Hoboken night.
Great guy.
Great
Anthony.
family, Petro. Thank you, Anthony.
Great guy. Spend a lot of good times with Anthony. Yeah.
Sure. How did you guys meet, your wife and you?
My wife and we actually met up in upstate New York. I was away for a weekend with the gang that you saw hanging out on the corner there.
Okay.
And, I bumped into her. We were out one night and we just started talking and, wrote down the phone number. No cell phones back then. And we got together. And on my first date with her, I had this great old Buick that I drove, and it was the most reliable car. But on my first date, it broke down. So, she's looking at me like, really?
Yeah.
I was like, no, I swear to God, you know what I mean? It's, so we met in upstate New York, and we got, we started dating and got together. And like I said, I came out on the winning end of that relationship. She tolerated me and continues to tolerate me. And hopefully will continue until I'm not here anymore, and then she can move on to somebody that's, gonna give her what she deserves. I'm only kidding, Jim.
No, yeah, I'm gonna say enjoy right now. Yeah. And who are these folks?
These are my two boys. They're 29 years old now.
So are they twins?
They are twins. Yeah, that's
Double trouble.
yeah. Joseph and Connor, two very typical all-American boys. Love sports and mischief and beat the hell out of each other back in the day. So, trying to find the ground that they fight through the ground and all. But yeah, I've been blessed with them, two wonderful kids, and they're out there taking their turn at life and throwing their hats in a ring, and a wonderful experience. Being their dad, and hopefully they say the same thing about me, despite all my shortcomings. And looking forward to watching them, move forward and grow. Two good kids.
Good work.
Very, very blessed. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Comment from Michael Canarazi.
Kazi.
Kazi. And John O'Brien, what about Hoboken High? You were a great classmate, great teammate, and still a great guy.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed my time. I was never a really good student.
You mentioned that before.
Yeah, I wasn't a good student, and it was like, I recently, as I was digging out these pictures, found all my report cards from a Lady of Grace, and if you don't believe me, just ask the nuns. Every comment was just, John could be better.
Do you
John
remember some comments?
Oh my God, yeah. Everything was either work that was potentially could be better. I didn't resonate to the memorization of the education and so on. So I enjoyed school, but I wasn't the best student back in the day.
Right. But you rose to the occasion with the fire department, and you probably had to study and teach and share.
And I had some wonderful mentors on the job. And when you think about high school, I'll give you an example how fortunate I was. I had people tell me, "Oh, you're very smart. You did the right thing. You started young." And it was more luck than anything. I had to put an application in for the fire department had to be 18 by June 9th, and my birthday was June the 4th. And I had to be out of high school by June 21st, and I graduated high school June 18th. So I just really came in, and I ended up getting on a job at the age of 19 years old. So I got in there really young, and by the time I was there a few years and decided that, I might want to try to move up, I walked into some really great examples and really great mentors on the job that, took me under their wing from if not a father, but certainly from an older, from a stable older brother standpoint. And,
Right.
Gave me the confidence to be a student that I didn't develop during if you want to call my education.
It's never too late.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So
My father.
Your dad.
Yeah, my father. This maybe at his retirement party. Our careers overlapped for a very, very short period, but he was out. I think he had a hernia at the time, so I think his retirement pretty much coincided with my coming onto the job.
Gotcha.
But this is probably his retirement dinner, if I'm not
Where
mistaken.
do you think it's Hoboken or?
That would be down in what is currently the McBride's. It used to be the Holiday Inn.
Okay.
Which is where we used to have the rackets, as we called them back then.
Right. Actually, today Rotendi was talking about the Holiday
Joe,
Inn.
yeah,
Joe was talking about that. So
great old place.
Yeah.
And you would have your retirements there, and your commute. You would have your parties there.
They had a back room, and
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
So that's I recall exactly what that was.
Right.
Yeah. So this picture was given to me by Robin McDonald, who is this man's daughter. That's Ed McDonald. Ed was he was my first deputy chief, who was the commander, what a battalion chief is today. The title has changed since then. And Ed Court, I became friends with him. He used to jog up in Stevens back in the day, as did I. So outside of being my boss, we jogged together and we talked together, and I'd walk down 9th Street where he lived, and we mutual respect from as many years difference as it was, but what a spectacular, unbelievably competent commander on the fire ground. You just knew you were in good hands with this guy. He was knowledgeable. He was empathetic. He treated you like a man. He wasn't afraid to administer discipline, street discipline, in his day. You'd go to hell and back for this guy when it came to working. The job of a chief officer, particularly these days, is to stay outside and command, but it wasn't unusual to be in the building and just look behind and see him in his white helmet, to get a look at what's going on and to encourage you to do what you want to, what needs to be done. And he actually there was one time back in the day, what we call the first in engine company, you didn't put what we call a Scott pack on. You went in there with nothing on to expedite the line, and he was behind me, and it was I'd like to say 10th and Hudson, and he jumped on my shoulders just before this thing flashed. Would have burnt my face off, and I'll never forget that. And I talked to him later on, and gave me an appreciation as for experience, what an education does for a person to be able to recognize that those things are going to happen. So yeah, I owe him a debt of gratitude for that. And
is this his helmet?
Just to give you some idea of, this is a fire chief's helmet if you ever wanted to see one.
Which has been through a lot.
This is a leather helmet that he had during the course of his career. This is not from age. This is looks exactly the way it did on his head back when he was commanding the fire ground. I could see his face underneath this shield right now as he made decisions and moved everything forward. And he kind of walked on water to me. We were fast friends, and he was very encouraging to me in my career as far as just buttressing me.
He helped make you.
Well, not so much from a study standpoint, but as much as the confidence he had in me made me feel like a little bit of confidence in myself. There were other fellas that helped.
You look so confident in this photo.
That was his retirement party.
It's such a great
Yeah,
shot.
that was his retirement.
You're like,
yeah. I didn't know the picture existed until Robin gave it to me a couple of years ago, and I was so appreciative because this is a great picture.
It's a moment.
It's a great picture. It's his retirement party.
Sure.
I really, really appreciate having that. But great guy, and Hoboken's horrendous fires. I started in '78, which was when all those bad fires occurred. Just through the luck of the draw, Group C, which Ed commanded, probably got 3/4 of those more horrendous fires back then. And it's a heck of a burden to shoulder for a fire ground commander. I had a little taste of it, but he just disproportionately had nothing to do with command decisions. A gallon of gasoline changes all the rules, everything you ever known and everything you ever learned. If anybody ever wanted to, purposefully set a fire, and no matter how much no matter how much you've seen, 2 fires in the same building or a gallon of gasoline influencing fire spread just changes all those rules. And unfortunately, he seemed to shoulder it well, but when you lose somebody, it goes against the very nature of what we do. So we were in good hands, and I'm glad it was him, but I feel bad that he had to go through it.
Right. Wow. You really presented him. Complexly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely.
My ace in the hole, Ed Scharneck. Ed is the guy that really had the most influence on me educationally. He was took a handful of us at one point, and he was a captain. He was studying for chief, and basically opened up his whole base of knowledge to a handful of us. That anytime he was in a firehouse, I would go and sit with him for 3 hours for years. And he would, as he was studying to be a deputy chief, he was helping us to study for captain.
Wow. So that was like your schooling.
Totally unselfish. And everybody was making money out there to go to school, and I'll teach you to be a captain or a lieutenant or a chief. And even after I got rank, I said, Eddie, what can I do for you? Let me take you to dinner. Let me do you. All he ever said was, keep your men tuned, make sure you get them home to their families. And that was the kind of guy he was. Was so respected with his people, and a really decent human being. And I'm to this day I shed tears. I visit his grave. I'm totally indebted to Ed for taking me and giving me the confidence that, hey, if I got this, I can do this.
Sure.
He's the guy that really.
Wow. And where is that, the grave?
It is out in North Arlington.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we lost him X amount of years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Good man.
You look like the biggest guy, though, in all these pictures. Is that?
These days I'm 6'3" and 2 something, and back then I was always 6'3" and still 2 something. But I'm on the more 2 something these days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't have a better picture of this gentleman. This is Bob Moore. I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with Bob, with his family back in the day. But he was another guy, a tower of wisdom. Got to spend a lot of time talking to him. Both he and Eddie wrestled with demons during the course of their life, came back, both worked their way up to chief officer. From a philosophical standpoint, Bob was a true mentor. He was he had philosophies, not just about the job, but about life. And just a great guy to sit up, not in these luxury firehouses, these old, window rattling, drafty firehouses. And you would sit up at night and just, you're captivated by his philosophies that he developed, to move forward in life, and the dedication to his family and to the job and to a lot of the young guys. Again, like Eddie, right up there with Eddie, just in a little bit of a different perspective. But and again, he's out in North Arlington too. I pass by and tip my hat. They both deserve to live a lot longer than they did. But Yeah.
So that's three people who really affected you.
And there were others. There was Tom Burns and Lou Maraca, and to this day, Larry Wallington is sitting in front of church
That's right.
towers down there. And Larry was a super fireman. He's the only living recipient of the city's Medal of Honor for bravery. And I remember being on a turntable, working a 100-foot ladder, and two guys were on what we call a deck gun. It's like that water cannon. And we were at a factory fire, and that wall came down. And I turned around through that dust, and I was like, those two guys just got killed. And I ran down over there, and they had moved this deck gun all the way back. And my friend Steve, he said, Wallington moved this. And I remember talking to Larry, and he says, well, you know, the brick and the expansion of the brick and the water, you know, the whole, and again, the appreciation there is education and training, where there's more lives saved by good calls by a good officer than you're ever going to see, you know, a rope rescue and the spectacular things that you see on TV. Right. And that's what these guys embraced. They embraced education. They embraced doing your job.
Really thinking of the firefighter safety too.
The cerebral end of it pays dividends that most people don't realize. Yeah.
Right.
But love Bobby, love Eddie. Thank you for putting them up.
Yeah.
Derva Highway, truck parked outside. My friend and my captain at the time, Fred Maya, great guy, good hard worker. Heck of a lot of fun with him. Great crew we had back then. A really good truck company. We had Angelo Ligo, Vin Guinta, Joe LeBruno, Dennis Rhodes, George Slorette. Look how young we were. So we don't have those trucks anymore. There's no more driving the back, what we used to call the tiller position. They've gone into a straight truck these days. It's a shame, but these getting around Hoboken streets, and I guess the price of them and the technology evolving with the other type of truck has replaced them. Right. But you could see the downtown area with the meat markets and the like. Good days. That's something everybody would relate to. That's the old.
We know where it is.
It's the hole in the ground. This isn't what it appeared. This is actually a drill. I'm not gonna Irish this one up. This was a drill that we worked with in coordination with the Port Authority. New York City was in on it, Jersey City and Hoboken, and we were going through the process of train derailments. Or at the time, I don't think there was any fear of terror attacks. It was long before that. But so there was medical and stretchers and these massive fan systems to pull the smoke out of the path tunnel and working in conjunction with other cities. So these pictures were taken by a gentleman named Jim Gilbride, who used to show up at these fires and just take pictures and come around the firehouse and sell them to us for like $2.50 each in $1982. So, you know, but that's how we captured a lot of the fire pictures. And
right. We have some more coming up, I think.
We do.
Yep.
All right. So April 1979, this is dated, and it's a New Jersey Firefighters Journal, obviously. This headline pretty much captures what was going on at the time. So Hoboken was sort of at the forefront here with 21 dying down at the 131 Clinton Street. But you could also see where we lost 7 down in Jersey City through Austin, and there was another 5 down in Newark. It was so rampant at the time. And I mean, from my perspective, I was so young at the time. I came on this job so young, where I would tiller and drive the back past Hoboken High and wave to some of the kids I played football with. They were still in high school, and it was great because you know you're waving to the girls and it was just I had probably between the time I came on in September in '78 and January or February of '79, I probably had a lot of small fires, but probably 8 or 9 multiple alarms. My first general alarm was where we lost the 21, where my phone actually rang and I had to go down there. And the department was kind of an old department at the time. A lot of young guys were going to come on in '85. So everything was, we need some young eyes on the roof. We need some youngness. And every time you hear young, you're like, oh, was that teenager, you know? So I find myself, you know, on a roof, you know, with a spotlight, looking down into the chasm of that building, you know, working along with the recovery effort, you know, to guide crane. It was such a humbling and grisly thing. You want to talk about getting grounded down, you know, and realizing that, you know, that this is not just about the adrenaline rush of the working fires when you see a loss, any loss of life, but a loss of life of that magnitude and some of the things that you were expected to do. Yeah, it was extremely humbling at a young age, and the only good thing that came out of it, as well as the subsequent fires, was gave me a full appreciation of what we do. And as I moved along in my career and got a little bit of rank for myself, I kind of took that work ethic with me. And some people may not have understood that, but maybe they understand it now. You know, that at any given time you might be called on to do that, and you need some muscle memory, you know, because sometimes you can pull up to such a horrendous scene that you just really have to depend on your you know, your training and experience to get you through those times.
And when you drive around Hoboken now, you probably have a little, you know, not flashbacks, but do you think of
I
the
could pass
various...
this. Though, just as recent as yesterday, I was in. It's the last. I remember this building being filled with fire from first to fifth floor.
Right.
You know, and I remember climbing a ladder and coming down and talking to Ed McDonald and saying it's coming up through the roof through the dumbwaiter. You know, it's up in the dumbwaiter elevator, and you know, beautiful condos today. I'm not going to give the address. You know, but
Sure.
yeah, no, there's a lot of things you'll pass by, and of course, how do you not have the memories?
Right. Right.
So this was a fire up on 14th Street. It was a very unfortunate fire. The stairway was compromised when we got there. So when that happens and we can't aggressively get the fire out from inside, we put up these master streams, these elevated streams with these heavy caliber water coming out of them, and you know, the chief officer will make a determination to sacrifice the building at some point, you know. So this happened quite often back in the day, some with loss of life, fortunately most without. But again, those dark days, we had those 6 or 7. I just about arrived on the scene when all that started.
Is this the Pinter Hotel?
That would be the Pinto Hotel,
Right.
yes, that would be the Pinto Hotel.
And where would you be when this is happening?
Well-
mean, you be stationed more down below?
Well,
or?
I mean, the ladder in the forefront was the ladder that I was driving that night. So my job that I would be assigned would be actually controlling that ladder from the turntable. But it's not unusual to get pulled and do something else and somebody to relieve you there.
Sure.
Those are the 2 ladder companies with the elevated streams up. Yeah. So I mean, I have no idea who that is at the top of the ladder. It could be that. It could be any of us. You know?
Right. Right.
So this
Different fire.
This is a spectacular fire. This is the Bamboo Works down on 9th and Jefferson Street. A tremendous fire load. And when we first pulled up, there was just a little smoke coming out. But again, it was Eddie McDonald's fire. We all basically knew that this was going to give us a big problem. You know,
A lot of fuel.
No sprinkler system, a tremendous amount of fuel. But I do recall that this was right in the crux of those days where we were having the large loss of life fires. And as crazy as it sounds, a fire of this magnitude, to pull up to this thing after what we've been going through and know that it was a factory and it wasn't an occupied building, we were actually, I mean, on my you actually approached it a lot more lighthearted than you did some of the other
A certain
buildings.
relief that there's not that pressure.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And that's my biggest memory of this spectacular fire. There was plenty of them back then. But I do remember just pulling up there and just basically saying, okay, you know, we're okay tonight.
And fire, you know, is bad anywhere, but in Hoboken, most of our buildings are attached, and you know, you have can
Yeah.
jump the roof, and
Yeah. Well, you know, when you're dealing with the post-Civil War construction, today you prevent fires on a drawing board, and then you'll prevent them with a fire prevention effort. And when it gets away from you, you got to call in the firemen and firewomen to extinguish it. But the post-Civil War construction, amazing how there was very little, if any, consideration put into containing a fire once it broke out. And I remember apartments burning before the coating got in. You're waiting for water, and you had glass transoms and glass in the doors, and you're just watching this fire start to wash up this hallway, go through dumbwaiter shafts, and go into an area in a roof called the cockloft. And the cockloft could basically run a block. You
right,
could
that's
look
the
at
space between the ceiling
the ceiling and the roof.
the roof.
And once fire gets in there, it's
It can really travel.
very easy to lose 2 and 3 buildings at a time.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So So the construction in Hoboken is it doesn't, you know, I mean, a lot of it is renovated these days and so on like that. A lot of corrections have been made, but there's plenty of old stock out there that the current department has to be able to deal with, and you know, chiefs have to make decisions accordingly.
Right. Right.
I remember this, yeah. So this was this was the Levelor fire where 80 cars exploded just from the radiant heat. Levelor was a block square building. It was a Levelor Lawrence and Blind company. It was made of heavy timber, so a tremendous fire load. And the sprinkler system, if memory serves me, was shut that day because it was being serviced, and a welder's torch touched this blaze off. So this thing was an amazing fire, if you want to call it that. And it was my I show my age, you know, I'm going to say it's it was my first general alarm as a captain. And my current boss, Stephen DeVincent, captain, a very good, solid man, good Christian man. He said to me, "Were you at that fire?" I said, "Yeah, that was my first fire as a captain. I had companies from Paramus and Secaucus working with me." I said, "You know, where were you during that?" He goes, "I was in the 7th grade. They sent us home from St. Anne." So yeah, that's how I know I'm getting a little bit older. You know, but back to the fire, I recall standing on a roof with one of the other firefighters and just looking around the city and seeing this devastation. And the wind coming out of the west was so strong. There were golf ball size embers going over the city, starting spot fires on roofs. And I remember all the way up at the Hudson River, the barge that Marlon Brando had to fight on burned, and St. Anne's Church nearly went, and it was spot fires all over. I was put in charge of a very small faction of it, but it was this big water tower that was on fire. In and of itself, you know, a challenging thing. And I was a rookie captain. They take these half a dozen companies and do what you can, because everybody had these headaches. Yeah. And again, that was an Eddie McDonald fire, as was the bamboo factory, as was the Pinta factory, as was, you know, many of the other ones.
As I remember, this fire burnt for several days.
Oh, yeah.
And you could go up to the heights and look down.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like the eye of a volcano or something. It was crazy.
And it was about 9 degrees. So, you know,
Right.
the ice was, you know, I mean.
Right. And no loss of life in this fire.
No loss of life.
Yeah.
No loss of life. The amazing part is there was a series of firemen that got put on. This fire was a lot of that first day on the job. There was a handful of guys that just got on the job. They were in the firehouse for about 20 minutes introducing themselves, and they rolled up to this.
Right.
I'm sure they questioned their decision to be a fireman at that point, you know?
Right. A bad place to park that day.
My goodness, yeah, the cars were just exploding. You're just watching them, and the tires are exploding, and they're burning, and they're, you know, it's
Crazy.
yeah.
Sure. This we presented as kind of a double photo, but it's the same fire and just a few moments after each other.
That house belonged to a retired firefighter. His name was Jim Green, and I think I was working out of the Uptown Firehouse, and that's pretty much what we pulled up to. I have that probably around the mid '90s.
Right.
And as I was just talking to you before about Hoboken's construction, you know, if these chief officers will pull up to this today, and it's safe to assume that a fire like that would have gotten into the cockloft, so that red building next to it and even further down is, you know, put in a lot of jeopardy. So, you know, these fellows with the white helmets, they got their work cut out for them today. You know, you take your education and your experience, and, you know, if you're an attorney, you could say, "Your Honor, we need a stay. We need the next week." And, you know, if you're a doctor, you got x-rays. But, you know, these guys are making decisions on the fly, and, taking the education that I said was so important. You know, you take guesses, you take educated guesses, but the more education you have, the better your guesses tend to be. So yeah, this is an example of some of the Hoboken housing stock and some of the challenges that it could present to these guys, which is why you're always going to need a well-manned and well-trained fire department to deal with these things. You couldn't deal with you couldn't deal with any type of a volunteer sort of service in the city or whatnot. The whole place would probably burn to the ground if, you know.
Pretty sobering, when you look at this and you drive around Hoboken, and there's a lot of housing stock like this.
Yeah, very much. As beautiful and as new as everything is, there's plenty of old housing stock that really warrants a good response from these men and women doing the job today to get in. And
like you said, there's the danger is it spreading from that space in between the roof and
No doubt.
the top
Yeah.
rafters.
Yeah.
And there is a firewall of brick generally.
There is. Today it has to be protruded above the roof several feet, but back then,
Right.
for whatever reason, they truly didn't incorporate that into the
Gotcha.
plans of the building,
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Second of Willow Avenue.
And that's you.
Yeah, that's me. That was a picture that was in a newspaper, as a matter of fact. And,
What's the tool you're holding?
That's a fire service tool. It's not unique to the fire service, but it's called a Halligan, which was the man that invented it. And it's a multi-purpose tool that it could be used to what we call overhaul, which would be removing that whole area of the window to expose hidden fire. Used in conjunction with a flathead axe to force doors. Very, very versatile tool. If you're in a ladder company, you go nowhere without a tool because you never know when you're going to need a tool to get yourself out of a jam.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And are you wearing the hat that you
That's
have?
the hat. Yeah.
You want to hold that up?
That is the hat. That is
We're kind of
So,
and segueing here, but what's unique about the hats? Like you talked about how they're made.
I did, and the unique thing about these hats today, they have polycarbonate. This is actually made.
I'm going to hold it up.
Yeah, that's actually made out of leather. And I remember going to Carnes out in Clifton. They happen to be close, but they're worldwide. And what they did is they put a machine on your head, and the machine had a feeler gauge on it that would penetrate a piece of paper, and it would simulate the actual shape of your head. And the craftsman out there would build a hardwood noggin, the exact same size of your head, and take this leather when it was soft, put it on that noggin, treat it with chemicals, make it harden, and sew it up. And it was your helmet. It fit your head.
Does it still fit?
To a T. Well,
Can we try it?
it's not a pair of pants, so I'm more optimistic.
Right.
But yeah,
It fits.
I don't know that you could get a baseball card up the side here. It fits perfectly. And they don't do it anymore. This was the standard of the day. I got to tell you, I got hit in the head with a lot of stuff, plaster and so on like that. And the leather just did a wonderful job of protecting you. But I guess the technologies that they have today, of course, are, there's a lot of things that they have today. Years ago, you knew if it was too hot, you'd feel it on your ears and your neck. Today, you're more encapsulated, which, you have to be these young people that are doing a job today. Have to be very smart about where they are because they're so well protected. You gotta be very aware of your environment. And,
Right.
yeah.
So, we mentioned that you were on the firefighter for 33 years, but
Yeah.
you are still driving around Hoboken and you
I-
are connected with the fire department. What are you up to?
I am. So when I had retired, it's an interesting question. How I got here I did not figure on being here. Like most firemen, I moonlighted on my furlough time. And I had been involved in show business with the theatrical union since the early 80s. My intention was I retired, get my kids into college. My father was spiraling, and I was going to get reacquainted with them. And prior to my dad passing, Rich Bloom, who was in my original crew, and we sort of came up the ranks together. Rich made chief, was a heck of a good chief, in my opinion. Took the department, forward, and gave me a call. And he said to me that there's an article in the paper, they're going to be hiring some part-time firefighters. And I stopped up fire prevention and spoke with the boss up there and said, I know John has his credentials. Maybe you want to try to get him in before you get somebody of, lesser experience and so on like that. So initially I said no. And then I figured I'd do it for a few months, and kind of bridge the gap until they can get somebody else up there that, that knew the landscape of the department and of the city and so on like that. So I went on the job probably that June after dotting a few I's and crossing some T's. I went up and I visited with the guys in the bureau and made sure that the union attorney was in touch and there was everything was exhausted and that we were ready to move along. So I went up there with the intention of in June, leaving around September, October, and getting back with the theatrical union, which I love those guys and I love the work that we did. Anyway, long story short, 10 years later, I sort of took advantage of this job to I enjoyed the prevention end of the job. It was good to know all the players, going back and knowing who did what. And the wonderful thing about the firehouse is that you have 25 years to distinguish yourself for better or worse among your peers. And we all get to know each other really well. You get to show your ethics, your morals, your professionalism. Everything is on display in the firehouse. So it was good that I went back and I knew everyone. And I was always a little bit of a type A when it came to work, but this was a mandatory gear down for me. And as I said before, I have a brother, Patrick, who, again, my sister does a wonderful job with, who I enjoy visiting with. And the part-time nature of the job enabled me to spend a little bit more time with him and keep that moving along. So it's about 11 years now, and I'm still here. I'm still enjoying it. The fat lady's not singing, but she's probably, drinking some honey and tea and getting ready to sing. But I still enjoy the people I work with profusely. And as long as I feel like I'm doing some good to help the people out and also keep the firefighters that are going to be doing their jobs, a little bit safer, being a clearing out a hallway of stuff they may trip over. As long as I feel like I'm bringing something to the table, I'll probably stay. If I become a grandfather one day,
You hear that, twins?
I'm sure.
Right.
I'm sure we're gonna have to. We're gonna have to give it some thought. But other than that, yeah, I'm kind of a lifer here. I think it's about 45 years now, all told.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
All started at Fifth and Garden.
yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of winding down. Is there
Okay.
anything else you want to
No,
share?
I want to thank you for having me. First of all, it's flattering to be with little like I think I told you, I used to listen to the stories of my dad's youth and be fascinated, and I guess I'm hitting the age and have a few stories where I could open a few eyes these days, and it's nice to be part of Hoboken's history, and look forward to seeing you again down the road a piece, and that's about it. Remain loyal to the fire service. Support your firefighters out there. When you need them, they're going to be there for you. I say that to the citizens of Hoboken. And to the firefighters, don't forget what you're here for when you walk into that firehouse every single day. These people are counting on you. They can't shop around. They can shop around for a plumber. They can't shop around for a fire department. So you need that mutual respect for each other. If you want the public support, you have to give them what they need. And I think that we're in good hands today on the fire department. It's in good shape.
Okay. Wow. We're going to do a few thank you credits. Vera signing in. Thank you for your service and commitment to Hoboken. And I think we had a great conversation.
Thank you.
I think
Enjoyed
you
that.
really opened up, and I really felt your connection to your coworkers, your fellow firemen, and
Yeah.
how you
Yeah.
spend a lot of time together, and
You
that
sure do.
trust is, and all your friendship is really important.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
honesty and moral decisions and
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah.
So very cool.
You get to know each other really
Yeah,
well.
here's Joanne. Such great stories. Happy to have met you. This is from Joanne Naughton Manley.
Okay.
So great. Scott Whalen, great job, Chief.
Scott. Yep.
Okay. And John, well done. We're all backed up here. This is great.
Petro.
Great repertoire between you two. Wonderful questions and answers. Enjoyed it very much. Thank you. And this could be one of the longest Hoboken Talks.
Really? How long are we on?
We're about an hour and 25 minutes, and
Wow.
then I got a few thank yous. So
Oh, okay.
hour and a half will probably be it. So stick around as we, again, a big thanks to John O'Brien. He is our first firefighter interview, which is great. And Eric is signing up. Thank you, wonderful show and firefighter. Want to thank Rand Hoppe for engineering this. Just mentioning Hoboken Talks will be on again in 2 weeks, where we'll have Shakira Fraser Rosa, and after that there'll be Mario Albunia, which I believe that would be Mario of Mario's Pizza.
I was
Right.
speaking with him today.
Okay, there's
Wonderful
a corner
guy.
that I drive by every
Yes.
day.
Great
And
man.
Vera Serrato will be interviewing him. Wolf said thank you for being his chief. Okay, so
Spent a lot of years with Wolf, and his dad was one of my bosses back in the day.
cool.
Yeah.
I just love that everyone is connected here.
Yeah.
We want to thank the New Jersey Historical Commission. They are one of our main funders, have helped with this program and keeping the lights on. New Jersey Council for the Humanities is the funder of our current exhibit, and we thank them so much for stepping up for that. And these are a group of people we call the Shipyard Circle. You'll probably recognize their names, a lot of the mover and shakers in Hoboken, and they help also keep the lights and things going. Iron State is our keystone supporter with the space, and we thank them every day. And
Wonderful people.
they are. And then just mentioning that our current exhibit, The Fires, Hoboken 1978 to 82, will close on December 22nd. It's been a good run. It's an important exhibit, we feel, and we've connected with a lot of great people through this exhibit, including John. And we do have our upper gallery exhibit going till November 5th. We thank Puppet Heap Studios, and the name of the exhibit is The Story of the Heap. It's almost too hard to explain, so you just got to show up and enjoy it, but we love the heap. And then after that, we'll be moving on with a new upper gallery exhibit, paintings by Maggie Hinders, the Hoboken Walkabout, and she really does a great job interpreting sort of special spaces in Hoboken. And we do like you to watch this program. It's archived on YouTube, and you can share and subscribe to our YouTube channel, which sort of gives us more credibility and more visibility. So definitely spread the word about this program. Thank you especially for all the people who texted in. And we will be signing off momentarily from the upper gallery with a really successful Hoboken Talks. Thank you, everyone.